I refused to fund my daughter-in-law's $50,000 luxury vacation. She slapped me and screamed, "Find somewhere else to live." My son nodded in agreement, muttering, "We'll make sure you regret this." I left with nowhere to go. 2 days later, I found a place to start over, and I'm grateful for it. Follow my story to the end and comment with the city you're reading from. I'd love to know how far my story has traveled. "I'm not paying $50,000 for your vacation, Jessica," I said, my voice steady but soft, though it felt like I just lit a fuse in my son Ryan's living room. Jessica's face contorted, her manicured nails digging into the glossy travel brochure until it creased. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp, the kind of tone that could cut through a room. She'd used it plenty of times in the 6 years since she married Ryan, always to make someone feel small. I squared my shoulders, summoning courage I wasn't sure I had left. "You heard me. I'm not paying for your anniversary trip." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan sat rigid on the sectional sofa, his eyes flicking between us like he was watching a boxing match. I knew whose side he'd take. He always picked Jessica. "Margaret," Jessica said, rising slowly, her tall frame looming over me as I stayed seated. "You must have misunderstood. This isn't optional." My heart pounded, but I held my ground. "I understood just fine, and my answer's no." That's when it happened. Her hand struck my cheek, the sound cracking through the room like a whip. The sting burned across my face, radiating down my jaw. I touched my skin, feeling the heat bloom beneath my fingers. "Get out," Jessica hissed, her polished facade crumbling. "I'm done supporting a selfish old woman who won't even help her family." I looked at Ryan, waiting for him to say something, anything, to tell his wife she'd gone too far. Instead, he gave a slow nod, avoiding my gaze. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible, "maybe it's time you found your own place. Jessica's right. We've been covering for you too long." The betrayal hurt worse than the slap. Ryan was my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his dad walked out when he was 4. I had worked double shifts at the diner, skipped vacations, and poured every penny into giving him a better life. And this was my reward. "I've been paying rent here for 2 years, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay composed. "I've chipped in for groceries, utilities, even that down payment on your SUV. Jessica let out a harsh laugh. "Chipped in? You mean that measly $900 a month? Bean's pulling 6 figures, Margaret. Your little help is pocket change." "Then why do you need my $50,000 for a vacation?" I shot back. Ryan finally met my eyes, and I saw something new in them: resentment. "Because we deserve it, Mom," he said. "Jessica and I work hard. We've earned a luxury getaway." "With my money?" I asked, incredulous. "Your money?" Jessica snapped. "We're just sitting on it. What are you saving it for? You're 63, no social life, no hobbies, nothing. At least let your family enjoy it." Her words cut deep because there was truth in them. I'd grown isolated since moving in with them, especially after Jessica subtly pushed my friends away, always finding reasons I couldn't go to book club or have visitors over. "I'm saving for emergencies," I said weakly. "This is an emergency," Ryan said, standing and crossing his arms. "Our marriage needs this trip, Mom. If you can't support that, maybe you need to rethink what family means." I stared at my son, barely recognizing the man he'd become. When had he turned so cold? When had I become a burden instead of his mother? "I understand," I whispered, grabbing my purse and standing on unsteady legs. "I'll pack my things." "Good," Jessica said, sinking back onto the sofa with a smug grin. "And don't think you can guilt us into changing our minds." Ryan's fully on board. As I headed toward the stairs to gather my belongings, Ryan's voice stopped me. "Mom, hold on." A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally stand up for me. Ryan's words hit like a punch. "We're going to need every cent you've got, Mom. That $50,000, plus whatever else you're hiding. It's only fair for everything Jessica and I have done for you." The flicker of hope I'd felt died instantly, replaced by a hollow chill that settled deep in my bones. I didn't trust myself to respond, so I turned and climbed the stairs to the small guest room that had been my home for 2 years. Acting was quick when you're treated like an intruder in your own family's house. You don't collect much. 2 suitcases, and a cardboard box of old photos. That was my life, reduced to what could fit in my trunk. As I dragged my bags downstairs, Jessica's voice floated from the kitchen, bright and triumphant. "Yeah, Mom, she's finally moving out. Such a relief. Ryan and I can finally have our space back." I froze at the bottom of the stairs, listening as she spun her version of the story. According to her, I generously decided to give them their freedom and even offered to fund their anniversary trip as a farewell gift. Ryan was nowhere in sight when I reached the front door, probably holed up in his home office, too spineless to face what he'd done. I set my bags down and took a final look around the house I'd helped them buy. The sleek granite countertops, the hardwood floors gleaming under recessed lights, it all mocked me. When Ryan and Jessica got married, I'd given them $25,000 from my savings as a wedding gift, money scraped together from years of waitressing and cleaning houses. I hauled my bags outside into the crisp evening air. My car, a beat-up 2008 Ford Focus, sat in the driveway like a loyal friend. At least it was mine, paid off with my own sweat. I loaded my things into the trunk, realizing I had no destination, no family to turn to, no close friends to call. That handful of people I'd once known had faded away, either through time or Jessica's quiet manipulations, always a reason I couldn't meet them for coffee or invite them over. I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel. At 63, I was homeless, alone with nothing but my car and what was left in my savings. Years came, sharp and bitter, blurring the suburban streetlights as the weight of it all crashed down. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his dad bailed when he was 4, had chosen his wife's greed over me. The child I'd sacrificed everything for had discarded me like trash. I started the car and drove through the quiet streets of our small Ohio town, past split-level houses glowing with families who probably still cared for each other, past the diner where I'd worked for decades, past a life that no longer felt like mine. As night fell, I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My cheek still bore a faint red mark from Jessica's slap, and my eyes were puffy from crying. I looked like what I was, a cast-off woman with nowhere to go. But beneath the pain, something stirred. It was small, unfamiliar, maybe anger, maybe the first hint that I deserved better. I checked my bank balance on my phone. $92,000. Not a fortune, but more than Jessica suspected. Money I'd saved dollar by dollar, working jobs that wrecked my knees and calloused my hands, always believing I was building a future for my family. Now I saw the truth. I'd built a cage for myself, woven from guilt, obligation, and a desperate need to be loved by people who only saw me as a cash machine. The question was, what? No. For 3 days, I lived in my car, drifting between parking lots, trying to figure out my next move. The nights were brutal, curled up in the backseat, startling at every noise, every passing shadow. During the day, I'd drive aimlessly, stopping at diners for coffee and the cheapest thing on the menu, stretching my money as far as it would go. On the 4th morning, I found myself at the marina on Lake Erie. I don't know what pulled me there, maybe the cry of gulls or the way the water sparkled in the dawn light. It reminded me of simpler times, when I was young and the world felt wide open. I parked near the docks and walked along the weatherboards, breathing in the sharp lake air. Massive cruise ships loomed over smaller boats, their sleek hulls glinting in the sun. I'd never been on a cruise, could never afford it, but I'd always wondered what it would be like to sail away from everything. That's when I saw him. He stood on the deck of a gleaming ship, dressed in a crisp white captain's uniform, his gray hair catching the breeze. Even after 40 years, I knew that silhouette instantly, the broad shoulders, the steady way he moved. Thomas Bennett. My breath caught, my heart pounding, so hard it echoed in my ears. Thomas Bennett, my first love, the man I'd planned to marry before life pulled us apart. I hadn't seen him since 1985, when we were both 23, working summer jobs at a bait shop on the lake, dreaming of a future we never got to share. I stood rooted to the dock, torn between fleeing and staying. I looked a mess. 3 days in my car, hair scraped into a messy bun, wearing the same jeans and sweater I left in. But before I could decide, he glanced up, and our eyes locked across the water. His face lit up with a smile, the same one that had melted me all those years ago. He raised a hand, waving, then started moving, striding toward the gangway. Margaret Sullivan. Hearing my maiden name after so long brought a lump to my throat. It's Margaret Hayes now, I called back, though the words felt hollow. Was I still a Hayes if my son had cut me out of his life? Thomas jogged down the gangway, and I saw the years had treated him well. Still tall and fit, though his hair was fully gray now, and faint lines framed his eyes, probably from years squinting across the water. "My God, Maggie," he said, stopping a few feet away, his voice warm. "After all this time." "Hey, Tom," I said, suddenly shy, like I was 23 again. Stealing glances at him over stacks of fishing nets. He studied me, not with judgment, but with quiet concern. "You look like you could use a decent meal and a strong coffee." I laughed, the sound wobbly. "That obvious, huh?" "I've spent 40 years on the water," he said, smiling softly. "I can read a person's face like I read the lake before a storm. Come aboard, Maggie. Let's catch up properly." I hesitated. "I don't want to be a bother. You're probably busy, and I'm not exactly cruise ship material right now." "Margaret," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm the captain. I decide who comes aboard my ship, and right now, I want an old friend who looks like she could use a friend of her own." His kindness nearly undid me. It had been so long since anyone spoke to me with warmth, without an agenda. I followed Thomas up the gangway, awestruck by the sheer size of the ship. "You're really a captain," I said, shaking my head. "You always talked about it, but seeing it's unreal." "The Northern Star," he said, pride in his voice. 2,000 passengers, crew of 700. She's been my home for the last 12 years. He led me through corridors that could have belonged in a 5-star hotel. Polished wood paneling, sparkling chandeliers, modern art on the walls. We passed upscale restaurants, a theater with plush red seats, and even a small boutique-lined atrium. "This is incredible," I murmured, taking it all in. "Wait till you see my quarters," Thomas said with a grin. "Captain's perks. Best view on the lake." His cabin was stunning, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the marina. It was bigger than most apartments, with a cozy sitting area, a sleek dining table, and a bedroom visible through an open door. "Coffee?" he asked, heading to a compact, but fully equipped kitchenette. "Please," I said, sinking into a cushioned chair, trying to wrap my head around the surreal turn my life had taken. 4 days ago, I was trapped in Ryan's house, feeling like a burden. Now I was in a ship captain's quarters, reconnecting with the man I'd loved decades ago. Thomas handed me a steaming mug and sat across from me, his hazel eyes searching my face. "So, Maggie," he said softly, "what brought you to my marina looking like you've been through a hurricane?" I sipped the coffee, rich and smooth, naturally, and struggled to find a starting point. "It's a long story. I've got time. We don't sail till tomorrow night." So I told him everything. About Mike walking out when Ryan was 4, leaving me to raise him alone. About working 2 jobs, waitressing and cleaning offices to keep us afloat. About Ryan's marriage to Jessica, moving into their house, and slowly losing myself in their world. I told him about their demand for $50,000 for luxury vacation, Jessica's slap, Ryan's betrayal, and the 3 nights I'd spent living in my car. Thomas listened, his face darkening with every word. When I finished, he set his mug down and leaned forward, his voice tight but controlled. "Let me get this straight. Your son and his wife tried to squeeze $50,000 out of you, and when you said no, they kicked you out?" I winced. "It sounds worse when you put it like that." "It's exactly as bad as it sounds, Maggie," he said. "That's elder abuse, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and making you homeless when you wouldn't give in." The words hit like a slap of their own. "It's not I mean, they used you," Thomas cut in, standing and pacing the room. "How much have you given them over the years?" I thought back. The $25,000 for their wedding, another $20,000 for their house down payment, rent, groceries, utilities, probably $70,000 over 2 years. "Over $100,000, Thomas said, his voice low. "Good Lord, Maggie." I wanted to help, I said, my voice small. "Ryan's my son, and you're his mother. That's a two-way street. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression softening. What's your plan now? I don't know, I admitted, shrugging. Find a cheap apartment, maybe. Get a job, if anyone will hire me at my age. Thomas gazed out at the marina, silent for a long moment. Then he turned back, his face unreadable. What if there's another option? What do you mean? He sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. I am not just the captain of this ship, Maggie. I am a co-owner of Bennett Cruises. Maybe you've heard of it? I shook my head. Cruise lines weren't exactly on my radar. We started small 25 years ago, a couple of ships on Great Lakes routes. Now we've got 10 ships running trips across the world. We're always looking for experienced people to join our management team. Thomas, I appreciate it, but I don't know the first thing about cruise ships or business, I said, my voice wavering. You know customer service, he countered. You know how to handle tough people, stretch a budget, solve problems under pressure. You've been doing it your whole life. He paused, his eyes steady. And you know what it's like to give everything for others, even when they don't give back. That's exactly what we need in our senior staff. I stared at him, stunned. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, he said, his voice serious. We're expanding, and we need someone to oversee guest services for the whole fleet. Someone who gets what it means to make people feel valued, who knows how it feels when the people who should care about you don't. The offer was so unexpected, so generous. I couldn't process it. Thomas, I can't. I don't know enough to run something like that. You know more than you think, he said, a small smile breaking through. And you'd have the best mentor in the business me. Something stirred inside me, a feeling I hadn't known in years. Hope, maybe, or the faint promise of a new beginning. Why? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would you do this for me? Thomas's eyes grew distant, like he was looking back through time. Remember the last time we saw each other? That night by the lake before you left for college? I nodded. I'd won a scholarship to a state university, a chance to build a better life. Thomas had landed his first job on a freighter, working the Great Lakes. We'd known our paths were splitting, too young and stubborn to fight for what we had. I should have asked you to stay, he said quietly. I should have found a way to make it work. Letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life. My breath hitched. Thomas, I'm not saying this to push you or expect anything, he added quickly. I just mean seeing you now, after all these years, feels like a second chance. Not just for us, but for you to have the life you deserve. I'm saying this because I never stopped caring about you, Maggie, Thomas said, his voice steady. If I can give you a chance to rebuild, to find something meaningful after what they put you through, maybe I can make up for not fighting for us back then. I set my coffee mug down, hands trembling. Outside, the marina buzzed with lifeboats gliding in, people chasing their futures. For so long, I'd just been surviving, propping up everyone else's dreams while mine faded. I don't know anything about business partnerships, I said cautiously. Good thing you've got the best teacher around. Thomas replied with a warm smile. What do you say, Maggie? Ready to sail into something new? I glanced around his sleek cabin, then thought of my car parked outside, stuffed with 2 suitcases and a box of memories. I thought of Ryan and Jessica, probably already planning their luxury vacation, expecting to bleed me dry. Maybe it was time to stop being the doormat in my own story. Yes, I said, the word feeling solid, certain. Yes, I'm ready. The next 6 weeks were a blur. Thomas wasn't kidding about being a great teacher. Every morning, I showed up at Bennett Cruises' modern office building overlooking Lake Erie, diving into the world of cruise operations. At first, it was overwhelming: guest experience protocols, safety regulations, staff coordination, vendor contracts, dining logistics. My mind reeled, but bit by bit, it started to click. My years of waitressing taught me how to read people and solve problems fast. Budgeting every penny as a single mom translated into managing fleet expenses. "You're a natural," Thomas said one afternoon as we pored over guest feedback reports in his office. Papers were scattered across a polished conference table worth more than my old yearly salary. "Just common sense," I said, though his praise warmed me. "People want to feel seen. They want quick solutions and good memories. It's not brain surgery." You'd be surprised how many forget that, Thomas said, grinning. They chase profit margins and lose sight of why we're here to create experiences people carry with them. I'd been staying in a company-owned condo near the office, a cozy one-bedroom with a view of the lake. It was temporary, Thomas said, until I decided where I wanted to settle. The idea of choosing my own path still felt like a dream. 3 weeks in, Thomas made the partnership official. I signed papers making me a 25% owner of Bennett Cruises, with authority over guest services for the entire fleet. My investment? The $50,000 I'd refused to give Jessica, now working for my future, not theirs. You sure about this? I'd asked in the lawyer's office, nerves creeping in. It's a big risk. The biggest risk I ever took was letting you go 40 years ago, Thomas said, his eyes steady. I'm not doing that again. There was an undeniable spark between us, but we kept it cautious. Most evenings, we'd share dinner, sometimes at upscale restaurants along the lakefront, sometimes just takeout in his apartment. We'd talk for hours about the past, the business, everything except the growing pull between us. I was changing. I felt it in the way I walked, the confidence in my voice during meetings. For the first time in years, I wasn't apologizing for existing. I wasn't begging for scraps of love. I was building something, and people respected me for it. Thomas had insisted I update my wardrobe for the role, and shopping for tailored blazers, sleek dresses, and heels that clicked with authority was a revelation. I'd spent decades in thrift store clothes, prioritizing durability over style. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a professional, not a discarded mother scraping by. My phone had been silent since I left Ryan's house. No calls, no texts, no concern for my well-being. Their silence said it all. I was out of their lives, just as they'd wanted. But I knew it wouldn't last out. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing staffing plans for our Alaskan routes. Ryan's name flashed on my phone. I stared at it, then answered. Hello, Ryan. Mom, where the hell are you? His voice was tense. We've been trying to track you down for weeks. I'm where you told me to be, I said, keeping my tone calm, professional. Living my own life. Look, about that night, he said, hesitating. Jessica feels awful about what happened. We both do. Why don't you come back, and we can sort this out like adults? I almost laughed. Come back, Ryan? You made it clear I wasn't welcome. Don't be dramatic, he said, irritation creeping in. We didn't mean it like that. We were stressed about money, and you decided your stress was my problem to fix. I cut in, my voice steady. What do you need, Ryan? A long pause. We're in a bind. Jessica, she invested some of our savings in a friend's business. It was supposed to be a sure thing, but it tanked last month. I closed my eyes. How much? Most of it, he mumbled. About $45,000. We can't cover the mortgage now, and the cruise line's demanding payment for the booking. So that was it. Not regret, not love, just another plea for cash. You thought I'd just hand over $45,000? Mom, please, he said, his voice cracking. We're family. I know we messed up, but we're desperate. The bank's talking foreclosure. Jessica says she can't stay married to someone who's a financial failure. The old Maggie would have caved, would have felt guilty and rushed to save them, sacrificing her own security. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Ryan, I said, my voice firm, listen to me carefully. I'm not giving you any money, I said, my voice steady as steel. Not for your mortgage, not for your cruise, nothing. Mom, you don't get it, Ryan said, his tone sharp with desperation. We're drowning here. I get it perfectly, I replied. You and Jessica blew your savings on a bad investment without a second thought. You made reckless choices, and now you expect me to clean up your mess. You got the money, he snapped. I know you do. How I spend my money isn't your business anymore, I said. You made that clear when you threw me out. We didn't throw you out, he said, his voice rising. We just needed you to contribute more. You demanded $50,000 and assaulted me when I said no. I shot back. Don't rewrite the story, Ryan. A heavy silence hung between us. When he spoke again, his tone was colder, sharper. Fine, but don't come crawling back when you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you. You're on your own now. The old Maggie would have buckled under that threat, but the new me just smiled. I'm already on my own, Ryan. And I'm doing better than ever. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, Thomas and I were at a cozy lakeside bistro, sharing a bottle of Pinot Noir. I told him about Ryan's call, and he listened, his jaw tight. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, swirling his glass. "Relieved," I said, surprised by my own honesty. I spent years hoping he'd value me, thinking if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, he'd see me as more than a bank account. Now I know that was never going to happen. To him, I'm just a fallback plan, and I'm done with that. Thomas reached across the table, his hand warm over mine. "I'm proud of you, Maggie." Those simple words hit deeper than I expected. When was the last time someone had been proud of me, seen my strength instead of my utility? "There's something else," Thomas said, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "Our booking team called today. A Mr. and Mrs. Ryan Hayes made a reservation on the Northern Star for next month's Alaskan cruise." My heart skipped. "They booked it? Without my money?" "Looks like they scraped it together," Thomas said, his expression neutral. "Probably maxed out credit cards." I processed this. Ryan and Jessica, on Rosanna, boarding the cruise they couldn't afford, funded by debt they couldn't pay. "They'll be on our ship," I said, the realization sinking in. "Our ship," Thomas corrected, squeezing my hand. "What do you want to do about it?" I thought for a moment. They'd board that ship, expecting a glamorous escape, snapping selfies by the pool, whining if their cocktails weren't perfect, oblivious that the woman they'd discarded, the mother they'd exploited, was now part owner of the company running their vacation. "I want to be there," I said finally. "Not to make a scene or confront them. I just want to see them, knowing who I am now, not who they thought I was." Thomas nodded. "The Northern Star is rolling out a new guest experience program next month. Perfect chance for the new VP of Guest Services to oversee operations in person." "VP of Guest Services?" I raised an eyebrow. "Effective immediately," Thomas said with a grin. "If you're up for it." I looked out at the marina. Lights reflecting on the water, the hum of life around me. 6 weeks ago, I was sleeping in my car, broken and alone. Now I was a business owner, a vice president, a woman with power and a future. "I'm up for it," I said. Thomas raised his glass. "To new chapters." "Who new chapters?" I echoed, clinking my glass against his. But my mind was already on the cruise, on Ryan and Jessica stepping aboard, still thinking I was the weak, desperate woman they'd pushed around. They had no idea what was waiting for them, and I planned to keep it that way for now. On embarkation day, I stood on the bridge of the Northern Star, watching passengers stream up the gangways. The controlled chaos of boarding had become familiar over the past month. 2,000 people, all buzzing with vacation excitement, expecting perfection. I'd been living aboard for 2 weeks, learning every detail of ship operations. My cabin, just down a private corridor from Thomas's, was a quiet comfort we didn't discuss, but both cherished. Our connection had grown naturally, like rediscovering a song we'd both loved 40 years ago. "There," Thomas said, pointing to a couple on gangway C. I spotted Ryan and Jessica from the bridge, and my stomach tightened. Even from a distance, Jessica's expensive luggage stood out, her sleek ponytail bouncing as she waved impatiently at the porters. Ryan trailed behind, looking worn at 38, his shoulders hunched in a way that screamed defeat, a man constantly trying to appease someone who was never satisfied. "They look exactly like I pictured," Thomas said quietly. I'd shown him a few old photos from my phone, the last traces of family I'd kept. He'd studied them like a tactician planning a chess move, which wasn't far off. We'd prepared for this moment carefully. "Remember," Thomas said, turning to me, "you're Margaret Bennett now, VP of Guest Services. To everyone here, you're just overseeing boarding operations." Margaret Bennett. I had started using the name a week ago at Thomas's suggestion, for business purposes, he'd said, though we both knew it carried deeper meaning. It was a shield, protecting the woman I'd become from the scars of the old Maggie. I descended to the main deck, my tailored navy blazer bearing the Bennett Cruises logo, my staff badge pinned prominently. I stationed myself near the guest services desk, pretending to review check-in protocols, but really waiting for the moment I'd both dreaded and anticipated. It took an hour for them to appear. Jessica strode into the atrium like she owned it, her designer sundress catching the light of the massive chandelier above. Ryan followed, eyes wide, taking in the ship's grandeur with the same awestruck look he'd had as a kid at the county fair or the Cleveland Zoo, places I'd taken him when his father wouldn't. They approached the guest services desk, Jessica already complaining. "There's been a mix-up," she said sharply to Sarah, our lead representative. "We booked a balcony suite, but you've stuck us in some tiny interior cabin." Sarah, ever professional, checked her tablet. "I show you in cabin 5 and 123. An interior cabin, as per your booking confirmation." "That's ridiculous," Jessica snapped. "I specifically requested a balcony suite." "I understand, ma'am," Sarah said calmly. "Let me check for upgrades. We have some balcony cabins available, but there's an upgrade fee of $900 per night. For a 7-night cruise, that's $6,300. Ryan cut in, his voice strained. "We can't afford that." Jessica spun on him, her eyes flashing. "Don't humiliate me, Ryan. We'll take the upgrade. We've already maxed out our cards for this trip," he said, lowering his voice, though I caught every word from where I stood nearby. "We can't." "Then figure it out," Jessica hissed, loud enough for me to hear. "I'm not spending our anniversary in a windowless box." This was my moment. I stepped forward, my professional smile locked in place. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the desk. "Is there an issue I can assist with?" Sarah looked relieved. "Ms. Bennett, these guests are requesting a cabin upgrade." Jessica turned to me, her gaze skimming over me without a hint of recognition. To her, I was just another employee. "Finally, someone competent," she said with exaggerated relief. "This girl seems to think we can't afford a simple upgrade." I met her eyes. The woman who'd slapped me, evicted me, tried to drain my savings. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to fix her problem, just as she always had. "I'm Margaret Bennett, Vice President of Guest Services," I said, extending my hand. "And you are?" "Jessica Hayes," she said, giving my hand a perfunctory shake. "This is my husband, Ryan. It's our anniversary, and we need a balcony suite." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Let me see what I can do." I stepped behind the desk, pretending to review their booking on Sarah's tablet. Ryan stood slightly behind Jessica, and when our eyes met, I saw a flicker of something: confusion, maybe recognition, but it vanished quickly. "I see the issue," I said after a moment. "Your booking was made recently, so most premium cabins are taken." "Recently?" Jessica's voice sharpened. "We booked months ago." I tilted my head, glancing at the screen. "Our records show this reservation was made 6 weeks ago, paid with a credit card, declined twice before it cleared." Ryan's face reddened. "There was a bank glitch," he mumbled. "Of course," I said, my tone pleasant. "It happens." The power in this moment was electric. For the first time, I held the upper hand with them. They needed something from me, and I could choose whether to give it. "I do have one option," I said finally. "A balcony suite opened up due to a last-minute cancellation. As an anniversary gesture, Bennett Cruises can waive the upgrade fee." Jessica's face lit up. "Really? That's fantastic. There's a small condition," I continued. "The suite includes dedicated concierge service, meaning you'll work directly with me to ensure your experience meets our highest standards." "Perfect," Jessica said, beaming. "We expect top-notch service." I smiled. "Excellent. Sarah will get you new cabin keys for Deck 11. The suite should exceed your expectations for your anniversary." As Sarah processed the change, Jessica leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Between us," she said conspiratorially, "it's so refreshing to deal with someone in charge instead of these low-level staff who don't get customer service." "I completely understand," I said, my voice smooth. "Good service is about giving people exactly what they've earned." 20 minutes later, I watched Ryan and Jessica head toward the elevators. Jessica practically glowed with smug satisfaction, thrilled at getting her way. Ryan glanced back once, and I caught a flicker of unease in his eyes, but he said nothing, trailing after his wife as he always did. I returned to the bridge, where Thomas waited with a knowing smile. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They don't have a clue who I am," I said, a mix of emotions swirling: relief, triumph, but also a quiet ache that my own son hadn't recognized me. "You okay?" Thomas asked, his voice gentle. I nodded slowly. I think so. It's strange seeing them like this. They're exactly who I knew they were, but it hits differently when you're not tied to their approval. Thomas's eyes softened. How shifts how you see things. They're in the Aurora suite now, I said. The one with the cameras. We'd chosen that suite deliberately. As part of our guest experience training, select cabins had discrete cameras to monitor service quality and guest satisfaction, fully disclosed in the booking fine print, though most passengers, like Jessica, never read it. And they've got dedicated concierge service, I added, with me as their concierge. Thomas grinned. They'll get exactly the service they deserve. The ship's horn blared, signaling departure. I watched the dock crew release the mooring lines, setting the Northern Star free. Soon, we'd be gliding through Alaskan waters, a floating world of 2,000 passengers and 700 crew, all under Thomas's command. Below, in their upgraded suite, Ryan and Jessica were likely ordering champagne and planning their spa day, oblivious that the woman they'd cast aside now controlled every detail of their vacation. The old Maggie would have felt guilty for the secrecy, would have rushed to reveal herself, to beg for reconciliation. But I was Margaret Bennett now, VP of Guest Services, part owner of this ship and company, partner to a man who saw my worth for who I was, not what I could give. Tomorrow was the welcome aboard gala, where Thomas always introduced key staff to the passengers. It was a chance for guests to meet the team behind their vacation. I was looking forward to that moment more than I cared to admit. "Henny, for your thoughts," Thomas said, joining me at the bridge windows as the marina faded into the distance. "I'm thinking about tomorrow night," I said, "when they realize who I am." "And how's that feel?" I considered it. Free. For the first time, truly free. The Northern Star sailed into the open water, leaving the shore behind. Ahead lay 7 days at sea, where Ryan and Jessica would slowly learn their actions had consequences they never saw coming. I wasn't plotting revenge, just letting them face the reality I'd lived for years. A world where respect is earned, not demanded, and worth is measured by character, not cash. The first 3 days of the cruise unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. As their dedicated concierge, I shadowed Ryan and Jessica's every move, keeping my distance while staying professional. They treated me as I'd expected, like a servant there to cater to their whims. "Margaret," Jessica would say, snapping her fingers when she wanted me, "the pillows in our suite aren't firm enough. Fix it." "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," I'd reply with polished courtesy. "I'll have housekeeping take care of it right away." Ryan barely looked at me, which shouldn't have hurt, but did. This was the boy I raised alone, the child I'd worked multiple jobs to support, and he stared through me like I was part of the decor. Through the cabin's discreet monitoring system, Thomas and I watched their private moments. Their fights were relentless, venomous. Jessica tore into Ryan constantly, his choice of shirts, his small talk, his failure to deliver the lavish life she craved. "I can't believe I married such a loser," she spat on the second night, adjusting her earrings in the suite's mirror as they dressed for dinner. "Your mother was right about one thing, you're a letdown." Ryan flinched. "Jessica, please. This is our anniversary." "Anniversary of what?" she sneered. 5 years of settling for less? At least when your mom was footing the bill, we had some class." "She'll come around," Ryan said weakly. "She always does." "No, she won't," Jessica snapped, grabbing her clutch. "She's gotten stingy in her old age." "Typical." "Well, at least this cruise is paid for. After this, we're making changes." I watched the exchange from the security office, Thomas at my side. He rested a hand on my shoulder. "Still think you made the wrong choice?" he asked quietly. I smiled tightly. Good service is about fairness, not just giving in to demands. 20 minutes later, I watched Ryan and Jessica disappear into the elevator. Jessica was practically radiant, smug about her victory. Ryan glanced back once, a shadow of unease in his eyes, but he stayed silent, following her as always. Back on the bridge, Thomas greeted me with a raised eyebrow. "How'd it go?" "They don't suspect a thing," I said, a tangle of emotions stirring satisfaction, relief, but also a quiet grief that my son saw me as a stranger. "You holding up okay?" Thomas asked, his voice soft. I nodded. It's weird seeing them so themselves. I always made excuses for them, blamed their stress or my shortcomings. Now I see them clearly and it's liberating, but it hurts. Alma squeezed my shoulder. Clarity changes everything. They're in the Aurora suite, I said, with the cameras. We'd chosen that suite intentionally, equipped with discreet monitoring for training purposes, disclosed in the fine print Jessica never read. And I'm their concierge, I added. Thomas's grin widened. They're in for a surprise. The Northern Star's horn sounded, and we pulled away from the dock, gliding toward the Alaskan horizon. Below, Ryan and Jessica were likely sipping cocktails, clueless that the woman they discarded now held the reins of their vacation. The old Maggie would have felt guilty for the deception, would have rushed to make peace. But I was Margaret Bennett, now VP of Guest Services, part owner of Bennett Cruises, and partner to a man who valued me for me. Tomorrow's welcome aboard gala, where Thomas introduced key staff, loomed large. I couldn't wait. Penny for your thoughts, Thomas said, standing beside me at the bridge windows as the shore faded. I'm thinking about the gala, I said, the moment they realize who I am. And how's that feel? Like freedom, I said, meaning it. Like I'm finally writing my own story. The first 3 days were a masterclass in control. As their concierge, I hovered just out of sight, delivering flawless service while they treated me like furniture. Margaret, Jessica would snap, waving a manicured hand. The towels in our suite aren't soft enough. Do better. Of course, Mrs. Hayes, I'd reply. All professionalism. I'll have housekeeping fix it immediately. Ryan barely acknowledged me, his eyes sliding past like I was invisible. It stung. This was the boy I'd raised alone, the kid I'd worked 3 jobs for. Now I was a ghost to him. The suite's cameras revealed their raw dynamic. Jessica's tirades were constant, shredding Ryan over everything: his shoes, his small talk, his failure to fund her dream lifestyle. I can't believe I'm stuck with you, she hissed on night 2, applying mascara in the suite's mirror. Your mom was right, you're a failure. Ryan recoiled. Jessica, this is our anniversary. Anniversary of what? She scoffed. 5 years of settling? At least when your mom was paying, we had some status. She'll cave, Ryan muttered. She always does. No, she won't, Jessica shot back. She's gotten selfish. Typical. At least we got this cruise paid for. I watched from the security office, Thomas beside me. His hand rested on my arm. Regretting your choice? He asked. I shook my head. The woman on that screen? I never really knew her. I made excuses, blamed myself. Now I see her for what she is. The 3rd day brought the tipping point. I was in the dining room, overseeing lunch service, when Jessica's voice cut through the hum of conversation. She stood at her table, berating a young server named Anna, a first-time crew member from Guatemala. This is unacceptable, Jessica barked, loud enough for heads to turn. I ordered my salmon without sauce, and you drowned it. Do you even understand English? Anna, whose English was near perfect despite a slight accent, apologized. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll bring a new plate right away. Not good enough, Jessica snapped. I want your manager. People like you shouldn't be working on a ship like this. People like you. The words hit like a slap, echoing the venom she'd aimed at me for years. Seeing it directed at Anna, 22, supporting her family back home, ignited a fire in me. Ryan sat silent, staring at his plate, too spineless to intervene. I approached, my professional smile masking the fury inside. Is there an issue? I asked calmly. Jessica spun around, relief flashing across her face. Margaret, thank God. This girl ruined my order and then argued about it. I glanced at Anna, who was fighting tears, then back at Jessica. I'm sure it's a simple mix-up. These things happen, not when staff are competent. Jessica retorted. I want her fired. The dining room went quiet, passengers watching, some with disgust, others with morbid curiosity. Mrs. Hayes, I said evenly, let's discuss this privately. No, she snapped. I want this handled now. She doesn't belong here. Anna's eyes pleaded with me. I knew her story, saving every penny for her siblings' education. Actually, I said, my voice sharpening, Anna is one of our top performers, recognized repeatedly for outstanding service. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Are you contradicting me? I'm stating facts, I said, my smile now edged with steel. Perhaps there was a miscommunication with your order. There was no miscommunication, Jessica hissed. She's incompetent, and you're too clueless to see bad service. The insult hung in the air, the dining room silent. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, Jessica's true colors on display for all to see. I assure you, Mrs. Hayes, I said quietly, I have extensive experience in guest services. More than you might guess. Something in my voice made her pause, her eyes studying me closely for the first time. Do I know you? She asked, frowning. Ryan looked up, his gaze locking onto mine. Recognition hit him like a wave, his face paling. Mom, he whispered. The word landed like a thunderclap in the silent room. Jessica whipped around to stare at him, then back at me, her jaw dropping. You, she stammered, cycling through shock, confusion, and rage. Hello, Ryan. Hello, Jessica, I said calmly. Jessica's face flushed with humiliation as she realized the room had heard Ryan's words. You're supposed to be broke, homeless, begging us to take you back, she sputtered. I said, for 4 days. Then I found something better. Ryan stared, shell-shocked. How are you here? On this ship? I work here, I said simply. Actually, I own part of it. Jessica staggered, gripping her chair for support. That's impossible, she breathed. Is it? I turned to the dining room, where passengers watched openly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for the disruption. Family matters can be complicated. I looked back at Jessica. As for your complaint, I'll note in your file that you tried to have an exemplary employee fired over a minor error. I smiled at Anna, who nodded, still shaken but visibly relieved she wasn't in trouble. Turning to Ryan and Jessica, I said, I believe you're enjoying your anniversary cruise. Please don't let me interrupt. We'll have time to catch up later. I started to walk away, but Jessica's voice, sharp with panic, stopped me. Wait, you can't just, we need to talk. I turned, my expression calmly professional. About what? About everything, she stammered. What happened? The misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, I said evenly. You made your feelings clear. I gestured to the elegant dining room. As you can see, I've moved on. Ryan found his voice, his face pale. Mom, please. Can we talk somewhere private? For a fleeting moment, seeing his desperate expression, the old instinct to comfort him stirred, but it was faint, drowned out by the truth of what he really wanted. We'll talk tomorrow night, I said, at the Welcome Aboard Gala. I'll be on stage with the senior staff. The weight of my words hit them like a wave. Jessica's face drained of color as she realized I wouldn't just be introduced as staff, but as a co-owner. Oh God, Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. What have we done? I looked at him. The son who'd chosen his wife screed over me, who'd seen me as a cash machine, not a mother. You got what you wanted, I said softly. A life without me. I walked away, leaving them frozen at their table, the murmurs of other passengers filling the air. As I headed to the staff quarters, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The secret was out. The game was over. Tomorrow, when Thomas introduced me to the entire ship as his partner in business and in life, Ryan and Jessica would grasp the full scope of what they'd lost. But more importantly, I'd be free of the last ties to a family that never truly valued me. The old Maggie would have agonized over their embarrassment. Margaret Bennett, however, felt only the quiet thrill of justice served. The night, I'd dine with Thomas in the captain's quarters planning our future. Tomorrow, I'd stand on stage as an equal, loved by a man who saw my worth. While Ryan and Jessica sat in the audience, realizing their actions had consequences they never imagined. The theater buzzed with anticipation for the Welcome Aboard Gala. 2,000 passengers filled the plush seats, dressed in cocktail attire, sipping champagne and soaking in the excitement. From backstage, I heard the clink of glasses and the hum of chatter. I stood in the wings, wearing a sleek emerald dress Thomas had helped pick out, elegant, confident, a far cry from the worn-out woman who'd slept in her car 2 months ago. In the mirror, I saw someone who belonged here, who'd earned her place. Ready for this? Thomas asked, adjusting his captain's uniform, his presence steady and reassuring. More ready than I've ever been, I said. And I meant it. Through a gap in the curtain, I spotted Ryan and Jessica in the 4th row. They'd dressed up likely their best clothes, bought for this cruise they couldn't afford. Ryan fidgeted with his phone, nervous, while Jessica sat stiffly, her face tight with dread. Since the dining room incident, they'd tried to reach me 3 times, calls to my cabin, notes left with guest services, even an attempt to catch me near the spa. I had sidestepped them, staying professional while keeping them at arm's length. Let them stew, let them wonder. The lights dimmed, and Thomas took the stage to a wave of applause. In his crisp uniform, he was commanding yet warm. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, "welcome to an unforgettable journey aboard the Northern Star. Tonight, I'm thrilled to introduce the team who makes this magic happen." He presented the executive chef, the entertainment director, the hotel manager, each met with warm applause. My heart beat steadily as I waited in the wings. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward. "And now," Thomas said, his voice softening with pride, "I want to introduce someone extraordinary to our Bennett Cruises family. Please welcome our Vice President of Guest Services and my business partner, Margaret Bennett." The applause was warm, genuine, but my eyes were locked on Ryan and Jessica. As I stepped into the spotlight, Jessica's jaw dropped, and Ryan went pale, gripping the armrests. The crowd clapped, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the 4th row. "Margaret joined us 2 months ago," Thomas continued, taking my hand as I reached his side, bringing decades of hospitality expertise and a passion for making every guest feel valued. "She's also the woman I'm going to marry." A ripple of delight swept through the audience. Passengers loved a love story, and the captain's romance with his business partner was the kind they'd share back home. But in the 4th row, Ryan looked like he might faint. Thomas leaned down, kissing me gently, a quiet declaration that sparked cheers and louder applause. I stepped to the microphone, my voice clear and steady. "I'm thrilled to be part of Bennett Cruises," I said, looking directly at Ryan and Jessica. "This company has become my home, and I'm dedicated to ensuring every guest feels the sense of belonging I found here." The irony wasn't lost on me or them. My son, who'd made me homeless, sat stunned, absorbing the weight of my words. After the show, as passengers mingled in the theater lobby, Ryan and Jessica pushed through the crowd toward the stage. I watched Ryan and Jessica approach, their movements telling their story. Ryan, hesitant, his steps heavy with uncertainty. Jessica, striding forward with the confidence of someone who still thought she could charm or bully her way out of any mess. "Mom," Ryan said as they reached me, his voice nearly lost in the lobby's chatter. "We need to talk." "I'm sure you do," I replied, my tone light but firm, "but I'm quite busy tonight. Business partner duties, you know." Jessica stepped forward, her face a calculated mix of contrition and control. The woman who'd slapped me, evicted me, and demanded my savings now faced the reality that I held all the cards. "Margaret," she said, forcing a conciliatory smile, "there's been a huge misunderstanding. We were so stressed when we said those things." "What things?" I asked, my voice innocent. "When you demanded $50,000? When you slapped me? When you kicked me out? Or when you tried to get my staff member fired yesterday for doing her job?" Each accusation landed like a punch. Nearby passengers glanced over, sensing the tension, and Jessica's smile faltered under their scrutiny. "Please," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "Can we talk somewhere private? You're still my mom." The words hung there. "You're still my mom," as if they could erase the betrayal, as if blood ties could undo the choices he'd made. "Am I?" I asked softly, "because when you threw me out, you made it clear I wasn't part of your family." "We were wrong," Ryan said, tears welling. "We messed up, but you can't just cut us off. We're family." I looked at the man who'd been my world for 38 years, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, and felt a quiet calm settle over me. The desperate need for his love, his approval, was gone, replaced by something stronger: self-worth. "Ryan," I said gently, "for 38 years I gave you everything. My time, my savings, my dreams. I worked myself to the bone to give you a better life. When you married Jessica, I welcomed her, helped with your house, covered bills, watched your kids when you needed a break." Ryan nodded, tears streaming now. "I know, Mom. You did so much. And when I needed something, not money, just respect, Just kindness. You chose her demands over my dignity. I nodded toward Jessica, who stood rigid. You watched her hit me and did nothing. You threw me out and tried to take what little I had left. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking, I said, my voice steady but kind. You were thinking about what was easiest for you, what would avoid a fight with her. You weren't thinking about me. Jessica finally spoke, her tone desperate. Look, we all said things we regret, but we're family. Families forgive. I turned to her, the woman who'd isolated me, who'd treated me like a bank account. Jessica, I said, you never saw me as family. You tolerated me when I was useful and discarded me when I wasn't. That's not family. But the money, she blurted, her mask slipping. You've got so much now, and we're struggling. The house, the debts, we could lose everything. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right. You might lose it all. Bad choices have consequences. Ryan's voice was hollow. You'd really let us lose our house? I'm not letting you do anything, I said. Your situation is the result of your decisions, Jessica's failed investment, your refusal to live within your means, your assumption I'd always bail you out. That's not my burden anymore. Thomas appeared beside me, fresh from his post-Kayla duties. He took in the scene of tears, the tension, the desperation on Ryan and Jessica's faces. Everything okay, Maggie? He asked, his arm slipping around my waist, a quiet show of support. Just catching up with my son and daughter-in-law, I said. They were just leaving. We're not. Jessica started, but I cut her off. You are, I said, my voice calm but final. This conversation is over. Enjoy the rest of your cruise. I turned, Thomas's arm guiding me away as we moved through the crowd. Behind us, I heard Jessica's sharp intake of breath, Rand's soft plea, but I didn't look back. The weight of their expectations, their entitlement, fell away with each step. As we reached the captain's quarters, Thomas poured us each a glass of wine. You handled that like a pro, he said, his eyes warm with admiration. I handled it like me, I said, smiling. The me I've always been, just free to show it. He raised his glass. To freedom, I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The Northern Star sailed on, carrying us toward the Alaskan glaciers, but I was already looking beyond the horizon. Ryan and Jessica would spend the rest of the cruise grappling with their choices, their debts, their fractured marriage. I, on the other hand, was building a life, running a company, planning a future with Thomas, and finally valuing myself. The next morning, I stood on the deck, the crisp Alaskan air filling my lungs. The ship buzzed with activity, passengers snapping photos of the icy peaks, crew members ensuring every detail was perfect. I spotted Ian and Jessica by the railing, arguing in hushed tones, their faces tense. They didn't see me, and I didn't approach. I had no need to. Their story was theirs now, and I was writing my own. Yes, you are, I said, my voice unwavering. This conversation is over. Ryan looked at me, his eyes desperate. Mom, please. I'll do anything. I'll leave Jessica if that's what you want. I'll beg on my knees. Just don't cut me off. His offer to leave Jessica was hollow, a panicked plea he'd never follow through on. Even if he meant it, it was too late. The trust was shattered, the bond broken. Ryan, I said, a strange pity softening my tone, I'm not cutting you off. You cut me off 2 months ago when you threw me out. I'm just living the reality you created. But you've got everything now, he stammered. You're rich, successful. I am, I said. I have a business I love, a man who respects me, a future full of possibilities. And most importantly, I have people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I glanced around the theater lobby at the passengers enjoying their evening, the crew who'd become my colleagues, Thomas, whose love had reminded me of my own strength. This is my family now. The words hit Ryan like a physical blow. He stepped back, the finality sinking in. You don't mean that, he whispered. I do, I said simply, taking Thomas's hand, feeling his steady warmth. I'm done being your fallback, Ryan. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for yours. I'm done pretending blood means more than respect. Jessica made a last, desperate play. What about grandchildren? She said, her voice sharp, aiming for my heart. Don't you want to be part of their lives? The question was meant to wound, to tug at the future I might miss. But instead of pain, I felt clarity. Any children you raise would grow up with your values, I said. Given how you've treated me, I think they're better off without my influence. With that, I turned and walked toward the deck, Thomas at my side. Behind us, Jessica's voice rose in a panicked pitch, Rian's pleas growing fainter. But I didn't look back. We stepped into the cool Alaskan night, the northern star gliding through dark waters, leaving a trail of shimmering waves under the stars. How do you feel? Thomas asked, pulling me close. Free, I said, the word carrying the weight of truth. Completely free. Any regrets? I thought of Ryan and Jessica, likely retreating to their suite, grappling with the consequences of their choices. I thought of the grandchildren I might never know, the family gatherings I'd never attend, the ties I was severing. None, I said, and I meant it. Thomas kissed me, soft and warm under the Alaskan sky. When we parted, he smiled. So, what's next for all this freedom? I looked out at the endless ocean, dotted with icy peaks promising adventures we'd share, a business we'd grow together. Everything, I said. I want it all. The next morning, Rian and Jessica disembarked at our first port of call in Juneau. They didn't finish the cruise, abandoning the vacation they'd bankrupted themselves for. From the captain's deck, I watched their tender boat carry them to shore, feeling only a calm sense of closure. The old Maggie would have chased after them, checkbook in hand, heart heavy with guilt. But I was Margaret Bennett, now business owner, cherished partner, a woman with dignity and purpose. I was who I was always meant to be. The northern star sailed on without them, carrying me toward a future I'd chosen, surrounded by people who saw my worth, not my wallet. At 63, my life was just beginning. Now, I'm curious about you. What would you do in my shoes? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose yourself over someone else's demands? Share your thoughts below. And if you're reading this, let me know the city you're in. I'd love to see how far my story has reached.